Thank you so much for joining us at the TechQuity Hub on today's Gals in Gear TechQuity Tuesday. I'm your host, Maria Campos. Super excited to be here today to talk about our panel about careers in sports and esports. And before I get to introduce all of our amazing panelists, we have to thank our sponsors. We're super grateful for Signient, AJA, Dell, Adobe, and Blackmagic Design, who are consistently there for us. And we have our new sponsor for our recent networking event, which is Backblaze. A lot of you may not know much about me, so I'm just going to give you a quick introduction. So I have 20 years of experience as a video producer, live event producer, a little bit of digital marketing, corporate communications. My career started back in Costa Rica when I was working as a video journalist, TV host, and producer for media outlets in technology, lifestyle, and entertainment. But for the past 7 years here in Plano, Texas, I've been producer and live event producer for Toyota Motor North America. And I am also part of the Dallas Producer Association's board and a proud Gals in Gear member since 2021. So this is an honor. It's a pleasure to be here today. But we have an amazing panel, and I'm going to give you a brief bio about each of the ladies that are joining us today. We're going to start by Addy Rose. She's a project manager at Encore Global. At night, Addy is a freelance producer and broadcast technician working with the likes of DreamHack, Evo, Chess.com, Team Liquid, Combo Breaker, Maelstrom Entertainment, and Ludwig Smash Invitational. Addy started out as a cable wrangler for Heck TV, and for the last 10 years, she's worked with PBS, BBC, WWE, and Tech Talk. She also was part of the teams that brought the iHeartRadio House of Music, AWS reInvent, TFT Vegas Open, and Mo Games Con to life. She often finds herself the only woman in the event broadcasting team, and I know many of you can relate to that, unfortunately. Addy leads by example in the hopes that she can break the unconventional norms or surrounding being by female esports producer and AV technician. In her spare time, she's an avid enjoyer of the League of Legends and teamfight tactics with her 9-year-old kitty bud. Welcome, Addy.
Thank you. Forgive me for having to use my laptop mic, but thanks for having me.
Next, we have, this is a dear friend of mine. I get to work with her a lot of the times, and it's amazing to have her here. Director of Photography and Camera Operator Luisa Mendoza, who has an interesting career path on both corporate and broadcast sides. She started in the business in the late 90s at the Dallas Production Company and quickly gained experience lighting multi-camera news and talk shows sets, along with camera operation for every kind of event. In the mid-2000s, she had worked her way to becoming a single camera DP, and one of her biggest accomplishments is her acceptance into the Society of Camera Operators. Her broadcast camera credits include live college sporting events for ESPN, concerts for PBS and CBS national broadcasts, as well as events like the Academy of Country Music Awards red carpet shows for Amazon. For NFL Films, she was camera operating on their docs and specials and has been on camera teams for seasonal games starting 2022. Welcome, Luisa.
All right, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be among all these women, and it's funny how small the world is, actually.
I know. Okay, and finally, we're super excited to welcome Wendy McInroy, Director of News and Highlights for the Olympic Broadcasting Services, or OBS. She has more than 25 years of experience in broadcasting, including 7 Olympics, just 7. She began her career at the BBC, working across their entertainment and children's output. She started out as floor assistant, moved up to researcher, and then assistant producer in the children's department. But she was always interested in sports, so she moved to BBC Sports and worked primarily on football, aka soccer, for everyone here in the US. In 2004, she got a job with Ireland-based Setenta Sports, working on their football and rugby coverage, and worked her way up to AP and senior producer in just 5 years. Afterwards, she did a stint as a freelancer and worked on events like FIFA World Cup 2010 in South Africa, Wimbledon, and London 2012. In 2013, she made a big decision to learn Espanol and moved to Spain, where she did some freelance work for OBS at Sochi 2014 before being offered a full-time position. She's been at OBS now for 10 years and oversees the production teams responsible for creating all the features, promos, news, and highlights that come together as Olympic Channel News, OCN. What a career, Wendy. Bienvenida.
Gracias. Nice to meet you all.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, definitely this is like an all-star lineup, and I'm so honored to have a little bit of your time to talk about like your amazing careers. And I think that the first question that comes to mind is like, what has been one of the proudest projects that you've accomplished and why? So let's start with you, Addy.
That's a tough question. So honestly, I actually think the proudest thing that I have done recently, I would say, is last year, because Vegas just started F1. I would say last year's activations for all the things for F1 really started. We weren't just interested in getting people that loved cars. We were trying to get people that are interested in the game, because F1 2024, F1 2023, racing sims has become a really big thing, especially as more and more people are interested in racing outside. It's a big thing outside of the United States. It's growing, I think, in popularity even now, but a lot of people don't know of the game. They don't know of the technology behind just using racing sims. And so honestly, I'm really proud of this because it was kind of a small thing first. It was just two simulators, kind of at a little pop-up. We were like, hey, Sentinel One, you sponsor a team. You have a convention called OneCon. Do you want to have some sims here? They're like, yeah, sure, why not? And then AWS kind of came in and said, hey, we give the race car drivers information on the way their reaction speeds are, the measurements as far as their car on the road, traction, all that stuff to help improve their race times. We want to also have these sims here, and sort of as we're expanding into that, this has been a long-term project. We're now trying to get into, I guess, into just esports racing, sim racing. So not just only, oh, we're seeing real racers on the track. We're trying to get into sort of this competitive, long-term, I guess, esports competitions into F1 racing, sim racing. So I'm really excited. It's kind of hard to say it's like a one-time project. It started from there and we're slowly bringing it out into the surface. We worked with Heineken this past year in New York. They worked with 100 Thieves, a esports group, and they kind of made their sort of first live stream event from that. And we're kind of pulling content creators and different folks to get them sort of excited about it, make it the new buzz in esports. So that's probably the most exciting thing I've, worked on so far, and it's continuing to grow from here. So.
Well, and I mean, I told you I was my F1 fan, and I can tell you that it's not just watching the race. Like you're literally on your phone, on your app, also following all these other stats. Like once you really know, and it's interesting about it, is that you're multitasking as the audience person experiencing that. You're from the behind the scenes of what's happening, but like I'm receiving all that data and all that content, and it makes my experience so much more different because I can see the car, I can see everything here, but then I can also track other things about my team or my drivers, which is really, really interesting. And I appreciate you giving us some insight of like, how is all that coming together? All right, let's switch it up to Luisa. What's one of the proudest projects you've worked with?
Well, I think just as a whole, because I do so much corporate stuff on the regular side of things, and I've always been into broadcast sports and whatnot. But just as a whole, being part of the NFL Films team, because now we're churning out Netflix show after Netflix show after Netflix show. So not only do my games count as well, and NFL Films will always tell you that outside of the military, we are the largest recorders of history out there in the world. And there's 102 of us camera operators covering all the games every weekend. And it's an amazing to be a part of that team and to see the women come in, and there's more of us. And but just to see how that, because they bring in, we have camera meetings every Friday, and they'll bring in the producers from all our Netflix shows, and they'll tell us how we've affected their shows or how we're making it better. And you think you're just a camera operator doing, I'm the master history record of the games for the Cowboys and the Texans. And I think, oh, I'm just here to do that. But then when I see my stuff winding up elsewhere, it's a lot of fun. And just to be part of that machine, I guess you don't realize where all the NFL Films content goes. And you know it goes to people that are, when it's their Hall of Fame moment, there's they pull out all that footage and that's all us. And if we don't get it, if we don't get that catch, if we don't get that pass, that poor person at their Hall of Fame, they missed that moment in their Hall of Fame. So it's, I think just being part of history like that for the NFL Films is probably my proudest moment. I guess it's like if you make movies, it's like my husband always says, it's like, oh, well, you work for the Marvel movies of
Yep,
sports. So that's, I guess,
definitely.
just being accepted onto that team has been amazing.
And that's a nice thing to see it, like that you're making history. Because like some of those like amazing moments that get into like people's minds, like that glorious like score that made the entire difference, and you were part of it. So that's a really good, interesting to see it that way. I'm very curious about what Wendy's gonna pick because 7 Olympics, Wimbledon. I mean, come on, take it away,
It's
Wendy.
yeah, it's hard to pick one. I think for various reasons in the last few games. Obviously we had two in COVID, which were exceptionally challenging, particularly the one in Beijing. So to actually have achieved them, was a very proud moment. However, Paris was my first games looking after Olympic Channel News. And part of my plan with one of my work colleagues, who's also a woman, we're very much trying to get more women involved in what we're doing, and in areas where women haven't normally been, the normal. For example, a video editors, we found it's been more difficult to get good female operators, and we did achieve getting a lot more than we have in the past. And in other areas, we had an initiative, which was actually my colleague's initiative, but it worked so well. I think it's something, again, that, for women, was great, was we had a thing called Framing the Future in Paris, which was, our plan was that every mixed zone camera operator would be a woman, and we achieved that. And they all did a very good job. Before there was always the people before, will they be good enough? Will they be able to focus? You always get these sort of comments, obviously mostly from men. And they did a very good job. And it was a great success. And from that, there will be a legacy of, that was about, I think about 40 or 50 camera operators. These women will now get the chance to move forward, having worked on an Olympic Games. And we'd hope that we will do similar things, maybe not in camera operators the next time, but we're always looking for ways to try and get more women involved. And because my colleague that I work most closely with is female, during Paris, we did really achieve quite an improvement in the number of women working in the Olympic Games in our area. And there are lots of ways that they still need to improve that, particularly in the live broadcast side of things. But little steps, we have to keep trying to push forward. So I would say that was probably my proudest moment of recent times.
And I have to say, like, sometimes that's all we need. We just need someone to give that opportunity, right? To
Yeah.
break in the mold. It's like I've been in so many other projects where, yes, I come in and I'm the only one. And it's kind of like, it's not that I'm not well received, but like you have to try harder. You need to get more buy-in. And I'm like, hey, I know how to do this. So sometimes all you need is that opportunity to give someone else the opportunity to show that they have the ability. And that's really impressive, especially like knowing that you have these amazing platforms for these big projects and events that you're working on. Like anybody would love to be part of that. So
And I think the fact, if you get somebody into, if you can put on your CV you've worked in Olympic Games, it will help them move
yeah.
into other areas as well, because it's seen as, one of the best sporting events to work on. So, we, not on the area that I work so much in OBS, but in the live, we're also trying to get more women in, that there's production teams that we use now for our live coverage are being encouraged to have more women in, not not just have a token women, but women directors, women camera operators, to try and get more women, because it's very much an IOC initiative that they want gender equality. They've got it now pretty much in the athletes taking part. Now we need to, make it happen behind the scenes.
That's amazing. So that is, each of you talked about something that you're proud of. Is there something right now that, like a project happening right now or soon enough, that it's getting you all excited? I mean, Addy, you talked about F1. So I mean, you might have some sort of challenge with that being kind of like your most recent project, that it's still ongoing. So what's exciting you about that as something that you're doing right now, building towards the future?
I think what's exciting about it is, again, there's just not a lot of women in it. I mean, even when I'm working with Amazon and AWS and their coding side of things, I mean, AWS taps into NFL, they're tapping into different sports in general, but like the coders there, they're all men. And when you meet with them and you're talking about production, and I go by Addy, but my legal name is Adrian. And if you just say it on the phone, you go, oh, you're expecting a gentleman to enter a call. And then all of a sudden, oh, look at that, it's a girl. Oh, okay, cool. And I think there's sometimes too, because, and I joke about this with my team, I work with the team called Event House, and Rowan works with me quite a bit, but he's based out of the UK, so sometimes we don't always get to hop on a call at the same time. But in the past, when we would have to, I would need him there, but they would direct all their questions to him, even though all his job is only knows the sim. He only knows the tech before that, but anything with production comes down to me, but they would talk to him. And I think there's still that sort of subconscious thing, because you could argue I can't tell through Zoom because you're talking to everybody, but at the same time you're like, oh, actually I think I'm noticing he's talking to me and not you, and I go, yep, that sounds about right. I think that's still kind of a big challenge too. I will say, I think at Event House we do have a good amount of, I would say 60-40. So the staffing as far as that is pretty good for men to women. And we're still trying to grow that number for those both going, working in the company at Event House, but also working as freelancers and working just on site as well, doing the hard work of setting those sims up, being there at events, and producing and working on site and operating it. But I think working with external groups, there's still this sort of, oh, F1's a men's sport. And just even in video games, oh, guys play games all the time. I complain about my boyfriend playing video games until midnight. It's not quite there's a disconnect still. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And it's not even just in my colleagues, they're getting used to, and the groups I work with are very proud of, the women on their team, but I'm working with outside groups that are still trying to get used to the idea, and still, they have their doubts. They have their doubts. So when Wendy was talking about that, I was thinking to myself, yep, that sounds about right. This is across the board. I think one of the biggest challenges is just not only getting our own industry, but other male dominant industries, when they start to connect with each other, they're still stuck in their sort of way of thinking too. So that's a thing to work on.
I think that's going to change when the F1 Academy comes out on Netflix, because everyone thinks
I hope so.
about males, and then there's a team of like young girls like working as hard as them and like making like crazy impact. And that's the thing, like there's still this bias, right? And when we come into broadcasting and we're able to show those stories, like now we're inspiring another side of generations to say like, oh, she can do that. And it becomes interesting and exciting. So definitely we'll follow up on our F1 conversation in a few years, Addy, on that challenge. What about you, Luisa? Something you're working on right now that's getting you really excited?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't have any one particular project because NFL Films is doing all the different shows right now. So, but it's neat to see how like Hard Knocks in season is coming together, because it's almost a live, they're covering the whole Northeast, and it's just a big project for them. But just along the lines of, I always like when I'm carrying all my gear in, because camera operating is a hard position and people don't, and I know the guys that are standing there like, oh, can you really build up that lens? I'm like, yeah, I can pick up a big box lens and put it on a I've been doing this for years now, and it's always been like, oh, who brought the girl? But it's like I'm out there it's hard work. That's why there's not a lot of women in there, because it is physically hard work. But I like when I stand there next to all the guy camera operators and I'm looking around the stands and I'm hoping that one little girl out there sees me down there with all those guys and goes, "Oh, wow." Maybe I can do that. And so I always try to talk to, if I see a girl and I think she's even remotely interested, or even a little boy, is like, just to know that he's like, because I never realized that you could really make money doing this. It's like I just kind of backed into this because I didn't want to grow up, so I wound up a camera operator as DP. But I love it, and it's like I live in the land of make believe, and I always joke, it's like, oh, you Muggles don't understand. It's the magic world, so we make it all happen. And so I always try to talk to anybody, and I hope that people see me when I'm coming through, pushing all my gear, that gives a spark to some little girl somewhere.
Definitely, I can relate because when I started as a journalist, my big break was doing something in technology for the Customer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. So I've never done a big trade show, and I just bought my camera and I got it from B&H, and I was so excited because back in Costa Rica we don't have like the ability to have big companies like that gives you gear. So I bought my HD camera with mini disc. And I show up at this event, and all these bloggers were DSLR cameras, and I'm carrying my gigantic bag with all the stuff and the cables hanging, doing my stand-ups myself. And I was like, I'll make it happen. But yeah, everyone else with like super easy gear to handle. And I was like, this is what I have, this is what I can work with. And then you learn how to work your way up on anything that you do. And then you look back and you're like, wow, like there's so much growth and everything that technology changes so fast. It gives you the ability to like get more equipment and more different ways to broadcast and make it easier and affordable. So I definitely relate to you, Luisa, on that. When they see like, oh, like how are you gonna do it yourself, or can you handle it just by yourself? Yeah, you can. Wendy, what is something you're working on right now that you're excited about?
Well, for me, it just goes from one games to the other. So obviously now we're working on Milano Cortina, the Winter Games in 2026. But also we're working on we have a youth Olympic Games as well, which is also every 4 years. And there was due to be one in 2022 in Dakar in Senegal. But it was cancelled due to COVID, and it's now happening after Milano Cortina, so it's about October 2026. And that will be quite an interesting thing to work on because there has never been an Olympic Games in Africa. So it will have many challenges, but hopefully it'll be quite interesting as well. But yeah, for me, it's just you go from one games to the next, so it's just a cycle. And then probably next year we'll have to start thinking about LA as well. That's kind of very early planning for that now for us, for where in the department I'm in. But yeah, it'll all start to kick off soon.
That's awesome. And even though we're already into the conversation, I just want to give a reminder to the audience, like at any point, if you have any question, just drop it in the chat, because at the end, we're going to have some time to address some of those Q&As. Like right now, we're kind of setting it up for a big background of like all of your diverse careers and how you've made it to where you are right now. And I think it would be interesting to hear from you. What kind of advice can you give to someone that wants to either start their career in sports or wants to transition from a different area, different sector into the sports or esports career? So what would be something that you can tell someone wanting to do that transition?
I would say well, for me, I would say don't give up, just keep trying, because, for me, when I decided that I wanted to move from entertainment and children's television, I'd always had an interest in sport, and I just kept asking, and I just kept at, the people and offering ideas, of ways that that you can be an addition, an important addition to their team, without overloading people with pestering them. But there's a balance. But I think it's just you've just got to keep trying and keep pushing and trying from different angles, and like a bit like this, networking with people and making sure that you make the right contacts and use them well when you find them, because it isn't, and television in general, or film is not an easy industry to get into in the first place. So once you're in, you've really got to take hold of that opportunity and run with it as well as you can. But for me, it's just don't give up.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. Because sometimes we feel discouraged when we're like, oh, we worked so hard towards that and we didn't get that opportunity. But like, it's gonna come. Like, you just need to keep opening the doors. And I think that's what I love, and what I joined Gals in Gear, because I purposely wanted to meet with more people in the industry and understand like the challenges, like how do you overcome, and just keep the motivation and the accountability within the group of your network, right? What about you, Luisa?
Well, I've been very proud, like NFL Films, like when they actually found me. So in 2015, I got received a phone call. They had found my website as a director of photography. I freaked out. It had to have been like a college kid getting drafted by the NFL. It was great. But they had even back then, they were looking for women. And so that's how I got in on their doc stuff. They're like, hey, will you operate on our specials at NFL Films Presents and all the docs? But now they've started an initiative and it's coming up. So if you follow them on LinkedIn, you'll see it. It is a women in sports cinematography workshop. It's a 2-day workshop. You have to pay to go there, but if you get selected, it gives you an in to all the sports kind of so whether you're an editor or an audio person or a camera operator, it's a 2-day intensive workshop put on by them, specifically to get more women into their group, because I think it's great. I've never felt more for a group of guys. You wouldn't think NFL Films would be the most inclusive place I've ever been, but actually those are the people that have not wanted me to they wanted to see me succeed more than any other group of guys that I've ever met in my life, which has been great. But also so watch out for that. That'll be coming up in the spring. But also I tell the women or anybody that wants to do sports, because there's a lot of young guys and it's just hard to get into sports no matter what, just like you said. But find, if you've got high school age kids or whatever, I mean, if it's your passion, find the standout sports stars in your local high schools, and and if you should, they need reels for college, you need reels to get places. So see what you can do for them and grow with them and maybe help them get to college and maybe get known or get it's easier just all the way around, just like it's easier to get published, it's easier to get your TV show on Netflix. If you're doing Instagram and reels in your threads right, you can get noticed too doing your sports, even for your kids or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because sometimes we think that it's only because, oh, I can only break in because I got a job. And not so much that, like all those training opportunities or those workshops or like all those mini events or even conferences will help you break that also, right? Like to get you into it. Addy, what about you?
So I guess I'll talk more on esports just because I started in collegiate esports back when I was in university. So 2013, 20 to like 2017, 2018, something like that. Don't want to age myself too much here. But like essentially I started in collegiate because I was in college and my state school was really close to Mizzou. And Mizzou is a very big football school and stuff like that. And they had really into sports. So I kind of was able to get into it through that. And I was a pre-med student. Just a quick backstory. I was a pre-med student that to balance out all the medical and health classes I was taking, I did every extracurricular that was in arts. I was a theater kid that was still desperate for anything that was creative. And so I learned a lot of broadcast, live broadcast, particularly from that. The years I spent sort of afterwards was more in the freelance side of, oh, you need a cam op for, I lived in St. Louis at the time. So with the Ferguson riots and stuff, my university was 4 blocks away from all the rioting, and they're like, we can't get people in and out, we need somebody there to cam up, you freelance, can you go in? Sure, why not? And so a lot of my experiences, I would say in the first half of my life, I would say was more, there was some luck involved in being at the right place at the right time, also being extremely available helped. But I think when I transitioned into esports, I had already had that interest for a while. I loved gaming. I volunteered a shit ton of my time. Forgive my language, I'm sorry. I spent a lot of that time volunteering. There's so much work I had done that was free. Mo GameCon in specific, it's a kind of like a convention for folks in St. Louis, Missouri and nearby states to enjoy retro gaming. And that was something that me and 5 friends who have a podcast together decided to pitch to all the stores nearby and said, you like to buy and trade, sell games. We don't have an event like that nearby. And we contacted everything when the same, that same state and everything around and went, hey, we're going to host this. What are the chances you'd be interested? We can't pay you as a vendor, but in trade of that, you don't have to pay us. We'll figure out everything with that. And so there were a lot of times where a lot of the work that we've done and I've done specifically have never seen a paycheck for. But I think a lot of what shows in especially esports is how hard you work, is especially how much you take time, because esports doesn't have, in certain areas, doesn't have a lot of money. I work in fighting games. We don't have that much money. Just the reality of it is there's not a lot. You can easily go to a different industry and get paid way more to do the exact same thing. But a lot of it's passion driven, especially in esports. And yes, don't work to the point that you are being taken advantage of, but also understand that many of us in esports, my partner, for example, has been doing work for years, even before he was 18, doing work, and some of it was free, eventually getting paid, but it's the slow rise into it. And that's, all of us have been in that same position. So I think it's not only, as Wendy says, to be persistent, but I'm someone who doubts myself a lot. So I am like, oh, I sent an email last week. I don't know if I should bother them again this week. Don't overthink that. I think a lot of it is just be confident, especially knowing that, hey, I actually want to get into this. And every time you message, add something new. Hey, I recently made this reel and it's an updated thing. Do stuff with especially here with Gals and Gears, you're able to meet with other people. You can work with each other to improve your reels, improve projects, do your own things, hone your craft. I think that's a big part too. The only reason I kept getting freelance work outside of esports was because they're like, oh, someone at BBC told me you did something with WWE one time. And I was like, yeah. And then I showed them what we had done and they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then we built more upon that and I honed in on my skills. I will never say I know every camera in the world, but I know a good amount. And that's just from learning off the clock or off of shows and then bringing it into the newer shows. So just, again, I think it's a combination of being persistent, being present, and also just time. Sometimes it's just time. And it's hard, especially after college.
I was just going to say as well, just on 2 things that you've just said. One, on the esports, the Olympics are now moving into esports, which is in Saudi Arabia next year. So that's, there's another opportunity for people. And just on Louisa's comment about, NFL have got some initiatives to try and get more women into broadcasting or into the industry, and OBS as well. We have a project that we run every games, which is mostly for people from the host city / country, and it's our broadcast training program. And we take, in a summer games, probably 1,400 students or people of that age, where they come in and they work in various departments of what we do. They get paid not a huge amounts of money, but they get paid, and they're, if it's a way of, and we try and put them to the areas that they're interested in. Now, you could be in the game services department, it's all about logistics and stuff, but you could equally, if you want, or if you're interested in working in post-production, you could be working in our team, you could be working on the live, so there is so many opportunities. And again, it's one of those things that after you've done that, if you're finished university, you're going for a job, and on your CV it says, I have worked for the Olympic Games, I'd guarantee most people would give you an interview.
And that's what I was talking about. Like, those 3 takeaways are great, because like Wendy, you talked about networking, right? Whether you are, whether you know about sports or not, but you're curious, I think curiosity opened those doors. So like building your network, Luisa, you talking about like finding those like training webinars or any type of program that gives you that, and Addy, the volunteering, all that builds that experience. And sometimes, yeah, you might not be able to start a career because I just graduated from this, but like you have that 360 of experience, not giving up, finding opportunities, volunteering, and building that resume with some of those things, that will make you transition from literally any industry. It will be an add-on, and it will probably be faster if you already know like what kind of sports and what kind of area, like, and build your goal of like, where do I really want to go? And Wendy, you talked about esports, the same as Addy, and now we're starting to see, because there's a higher demand for sports content, right? So, and now it's just remote productions and virtual productions and multicasting, live streaming and apps and all these things. So do you think these trends are affecting your current work, like either positive or negative?
I mean, they affect it in that things have changed probably where, for example, for Olympic Games, mostly, to be honest, for youth Olympic Games, we do most of our production remotely from our base in Madrid. So obviously not the camera operators, but any of the post-production, it's all the feeds coming back. We create all of our post-produced content back in Madrid to keep costs down more than anything. But it works, and it's, you know, we've used new technologies for that. We've used it. We try in our youth games. We often trial new things. So we'll trial some AI cameras working on, you know, on a youth games where we may not want to do that in a main games when, you know, people are paid an awful lot of money for and if it goes wrong, then we've got problems. But we've used so many different types of technology now, and we, as a company, we have our you know, the team, the engineering team, who are always looking for new ways of working. In the Olympics in Paris, we used what we call remote OB vans, and you know, it's basically just some racks. It's not an OB van at all, but it's a new way of working where we don't require massive trucks and all of that infrastructure. So we're always looking for ways to make things more streamlined and more, you know, getting the most out of what we do. But yeah, I think we're always having to look for new ways of doing things.
Awesome, Wendy. I know I was going to toss it up to Luisa, but Luisa, you have to go work.
Yeah, yes, work calls.
We
Sorry.
are so grateful for having a little bit of your time here with us. Everyone that wants to connect with Luisa Mendoza, they can go to their LinkedIn. We're probably going to post everyone's LinkedIn later
Yep.
on in chat,
It
so
was
they can
great.
connect.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you,
I
Luisa.
love it. I love it.
Awesome.
See you guys later.
See
Bye.
ya.
Bye.
I mean, Addy, you're in the core of it because like you're really already working and doing the
yikes.
e-sport. So anything that you want to add onto like, is that been like a positive impact to your work, or it has been actually like a challenging impact of your work?
I think both is the nice answer. I think it's nice in the sense that for especially those who really like the work, it's exciting to know, hey, the industry is growing and there's a growing interest in it. I think the challenge of that is that sometimes you then have, and this is, I think, true for any sort of change in the direction industry, or change in interest. For example, even traditional broadcast kind of dying, and as we're going into more online subscriptions of like Netflix and Hulu and Roku TV and things like that, I think, and that old media dying, I think the hard part of transition for anything is that people sometimes stick in their box of way of thinking. Oh, the rules that applied here must carry over to how we do things now. I worked on a show where I feel like, kind of as Wendy was saying, a lot of groups now, like even chess.com, they just send their operators on site, but everything else is streamed and handled and recorded remotely. And you know, we handle the streaming there, I do replays for them there, and I do it in the comfort of my own home while our cam operators out in Toronto or wherever. But there have been times where esports shows, as they get money from larger companies, they go, oh, we're going to hire let's say this director that has been doing live events for years. Great, but they come in with hardware that isn't compatible with the way that necessarily esports came from, because it's grassroots. And so then you have this sort of disconnect conversation of having folks that maybe are talented in what they do for 10 years because they did The Bachelor, they produced and directed The Bachelor for 10 years. But then you have folks that have been doing esports grassroots for 5, 8, 10 years, but they've only been doing it off of their built PCs, their built gear that they've boutiqued together and have made it work for so long. So then you have this disconnect when they start to work together, and then it causes, there's a lot of confusions, there's a lot of problems. There can be a lot of, well, I did it this way and I did it this way. So I think in a way it's both. I think I'm happy to see people getting excited about esports. I'm happy to see it starting to grow. But my fears of that is that if we stick too much into the way of how we used to do things, I think, for any sort of industry, it's going to become a problem. I did not know that the Olympics has kind of moved into this sort of direction of being streamlining everything. That's great. I mean, I talked to a friend who worked at Warner Brothers, or sorry, is still working there. And they're talking about how, a lot of their hardware, they're just starting to get rid of. They're trying to go into more of this software space because it just makes more sense. It's more cost effective, it's more streamlined. You can hire talent almost anywhere, and you're not limited to forcing them to move or anything like that. So I think it's as far as to answer your question there, I think it's a mixed bag for me, at the very least, being in it. I think it's a very mixed bag, but some good, some bad.
And to add more into that conversation, actually, our founder for GALSNGEAR, Amy DeLuise, is in New York at the Sports Video Group Summit. And she's leading a conversation on women in sports with Meg Arowitz from ESPN, Amy Rosenfeld from NBC Sports, who is also the Senior Vice President of their Olympics and Paralympics production, and Dana Rubin from United Soccer League. And I think she wants to give us also some insights of what happened in that conversation, also what's happening in the industry. So Amy, you wanna join this conversation?
Sure. Thanks for letting me jump in. Also because I'm in some kind of small room in the Hilton where the lights keep going off and there's no heat. So my mic's off in a corner here. Well, I think, all the things you're talking about are really important. And I wanted to actually answer Zuri's question that she had asked earlier about, are people looking for people outside of college years or targeting younger generations? And really the women that we talked to yesterday are doing both, all of their organizations. So it wasn't just Amy at NBC and Dana at USL. We also talked to Chrissy Franklin at Octagon, which is, the marketing partner deal maker for all those NIL deals and partnerships with corporations. We talked to Pat Lowry from Game Time, who of course was at ESPN for a million years doing stuff. Well, I don't want to make her sound too old, but she was there for a lot of years doing all their sports coverage. Bess Barnes from CBS Sports was on the panel, Meg Arnowitz from ESPN. So it was like an incredible brain trust. And every single one of those organizations has paid internships. So for the younger folks coming on board, there's definitely opportunities there. The one that Louisa mentioned at NFL Films is something that's going on. We're actually partnering with some other organizations that have camera operators, specifically remote camera operation partnerships that we're going to be announcing a sponsorship so that we can pay for somebody to go take that workshop for broadcast. But also for those who are, been in the industry longer, there are also opportunities to do shorter trainings. Program Productions is looking for people in every possible category of productions. They produced, I think they said 52,000 live sporting events last year, and they're constantly crewing up jobs, and they have their own internal training program. So for people who, let's say you're a TD, but you might not have been a TD in that particular sport, they have a short training program that you can go through before they could place you in a job, et cetera. So there are definitely opportunities at every level in the industry. But I think the thing that really was my big takeaway yesterday was just that women's sports is making money now. I think Deloitte gave a great presentation, and one of the things they talked about was that there were 9 million viewers of the Olympics women's gold medal soccer game. There were 18.7 million views of the women's NCAA basketball championship, and that was 4 million more than the men's NCAA championship. There's 30% growth in WNBA teams. Those were just a few of the data points that I was able to jot down. And on the marketing side, for every dollar invested by a corporation that's doing some kind of marketing sponsorship, for every dollar, they're making $1.73 on women's sports. So I think the bottom line is women's sports is making money. And then for those of us who, thumbs up from Ansel, who's the DP who's here. So for, when the sports are making money, then obviously they can afford to hire more people, have more coverage. I think one of the things that Amy talked about, and I'm sure that Wendy knows all about this because Amy runs the Olympics and Paralympics production on the NBC sports side. She was talking about how, first of all, they have a team of 10 people and 8 of them are women on her team that are part of that group, who I'm sure Wendy knows. And also, she was talking about the new technologies of cameras allow sort of smaller storytelling, more focused storytelling, little vignettes about particular athletes. And a lot of those are women athletes who have already built up their social media followings. And then, NBC Sports or whoever can, follow up with some smaller operations to deliver those stories as sort of shoulder content or additional programming that goes along with the main programming. And so all of those pieces of programming strands need people to be producing it and shooting it and editing it and, all of that stuff. So I think the bottom line is there are a lot more jobs than there ever were before. I mean, I know from my own side of things that we're constantly hiring people in jobs that didn't even exist 5 years ago to work on our productions, let alone when I started in the industry. So I think it's a constantly morphing and growing industry, and I think there's opportunities everywhere, but I'm especially excited about women's sports that hopefully we'll stop calling women's sports and we'll just call it sports that happen to have women athletes in it. But I see Wendy nodding. So if you want to add anything on that, Wendy, feel free.
No, I'm just agree with you. I think it's an interesting time. In the Olympics now, as I said earlier, we are very much more about gender balance, and that the same amount of male athletes take part as the women, and we represent them the same way. We would never cover men's football different or soccer differently to women's soccer. In fact, if you look at it in Olympics, actually women's soccer is much more popular than the men's in an Olympic environment.
Yes, and
I
somebody
think
just put a post about that in the chat too.
yes,
So about
yeah.
the popularity. And I think the other thing that came up was really this idea that the athletes themselves are now content producers, right? I mean, everybody's a content creator. I tend to not love doing selfie things, but for the most part, everybody is a content creator. And so these athletes, I mean, even, everybody knows Caitlin Collins and Olivia Dunn, but even like Alona Maher, who's a rugby player, has like 5 million followers on whatever channels. I think she's on Instagram. So even if you're in an industry which maybe wouldn't normally have gotten as global coverage or as big sort of high level coverage, you yourself are covering yourself, and that raises your profile. It gives you opportunities for corporate sponsorships. It makes the coverage possible, in some ways. So I just thought it was a really interesting session on the evolution of the industry. So I'm pretty excited about it, and we'll be doing more on this subject to be in the future with our partners at SVG. So thanks for letting me hop in for just a moment and talk about that.
Thank you so much, Amy. And that leads me into like one of the questions that I have here that we were talking about, like how this industry has been changing. Do you feel that it's now more inclusive, or have you found like a stronger network or females in media since you started working in esports and sports?
I think so. I think actually I also saw Zuri's question too about like getting into esports outside of college. There's also, and Amy had spoken, and Luisa as well, about opportunities, especially if you're looking more for esports. There's also a group called 1,000 Dreams Fund that does stipend sort of fellowships, as they call it, into esports. And I think because in the last, I would say maybe 4 years, I've met more women's groups geared towards not only just putting more people in esports, because that's just the scene I'm in, but like there's these groups that are just trying to get more female operators, not just project managers, but also those that are on the floor, camera operating, actually doing rigging, things like that. I think for me, at the very least, I would say, funny enough, I think there is more inclusivity in the industry. I think there's just some areas that are a lot slower than others to integrate that. And I think it's a very group by group basis. I know chess.com has had some challenges and are trying to start to, they kind of raise that flag and went, everyone in this room outside of Addy, when we call her to replay, is a guy. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, and so it's just little things like that that I think when we start, like when we talk about those things, and I think one of my things I've always pointed out is, be a good worker, to the point I would like to reach to a point where it doesn't matter, about guys and girls, we all do the work, good work. It shouldn't be about, the same problem of, oh, we need to have women staff because we want to look good in numbers. It should be, no, we have talented staff. That's the end all be all, regardless of gender. At least that's where I hope this direction goes one day. But we are in a good point, I think, of adding more inclusivity. Groups like this, 1000 Dreams Fund at the very least is something that comes at the top of my head. Luisa mentioned NFL. I'm very well aware at how exclusive, or say inclusive, NFL is. So we're getting there. Work is being made.
Sometimes you need to dig into that, because like I would have not known from what Wendy told us about OBS doing all this training and all these opportunities. I might want to be looking into that, but I don't know that it's happening. So I need to be kind of like looking at the networks or the areas or the industry. And I'm like, what kind of programs do they have? Like dig into their websites, find that, because there might be an opportunity, but it's just not in your face. It's not just easy to find it. So I do know Wendy has more to say about that, since you're working on building that and bringing in more females into the productions that you're working with. So any other type of advice?
I mean, I think it's just my point, kind of on the back of what Addy said, was, I would like it to be that someday we're not just, it's not tokenism, that people just are employing women to fix their numbers and go, oh, we've got this amount percentage of people working, and that we want to bring women through, and we want to train them, and we want them to be able to do jobs, but we equally, well, I don't want a woman to be in a job that she can't do, and then she makes that look bad for everybody else. And it's not because of her, really, but somebody's just trying to tick a box and put somebody into a job to make, their numbers look better. And I think in the past that has been the case, in even we're in OBS, but I don't think it's like that anymore. I think it's much more now, the women that are there are saying, we don't want tokenism. We want proper training and programs that will help us get people into these jobs, but we need to actually put some money behind it and some effort behind it to make that happen, because OBS are also running, I don't know exactly all the details. It's on LinkedIn. If you go through OBS's LinkedIn, you would find it, and it's through the engineering department, and it's trying to get more female engineers, which is a really difficult thing to get, because girls don't naturally, the majority don't naturally move towards engineering, and they're really trying to start an initiative to not just find them, but train people. You can't just go, we're looking for female engineers. You're not going to find them by that. If you're trying to get university students who are in some sort of engineering course, they probably haven't even thought about it. Could be an engineering course based around television or broadcasting. If you can kind of move, get them to, be interested in that sort of thing, it's an area they probably have not thought of. They've probably thought of the more, traditional engineering jobs. So we are looking at ways of doing that, but we realize now much more that we need to put some effort behind that, as well as money, to try and train these people, to give them the opportunity where they will develop in their careers, but also hopefully other people will come behind them and go, oh, they did that. I can do that. That's an option that we didn't even know that exists, because it's like we've kind of mentioned so many different types of jobs here today. There are so many different jobs in this industry, and if you're in a careers advisory thing at school, when they don't tell you about half these jobs. There's no clue that these jobs exist, and I think we need to make people aware of what these jobs are and where they are and how we can get more women into these roles for future. I think that's kind of what I'd like to see.
And that was kind of my wrap-up question for this conversation about like how you see the future of sports in media. But I think we all touch a little bit in what Amy said about like there is money, there's opportunities, there's programs, right? So it's summarizing that it's positive. Like it is there. We just need to like say like do that groundwork if that's something that you want to go into. Is there any tool, trend, or some sort of certification that you think it will give someone a competitive advantage in their careers if they want to start getting into the sports area?
I'm not sure there's anything specific. I think it's mostly it's all the things we've talked about, like Addy was talking about, all of us have done jobs that we didn't get paid for at the very start. And we've really, because you were interested, because you were keen and you wanted to do that role, you wanted to get into that area, you knew that you just had to do some things for nothing. Now, I'm not suggesting that people should work for nothing forever, but you have to take some of these opportunities, and it's not a 9-to-5 job. Never think that working in this industry is 9 to 5. And maybe you'll have some irregular hours as you try and get to the point of the role or the career path that you want. And I think you just have to, everybody's career path, I think, is different. I mean, I think of when I first started in television and I asked people that I worked with, what was what did you do your degree in, or what did you do? I don't think any of them had done a media degree. They'd done things like chemistry or English or French or business studies. I did business studies. Everybody has come from different areas and different backgrounds, and I think we just have to I think you just have to have a very clear vision of what it is you want, and just keep pursuing it. And like we said, things like LinkedIn is a good resource for things like this. If you do a bit of research and dig, you will find a lot of these things are on there that will help you, and people that will help. I think most of us would, to the younger person, if somebody now said to me as my little 18-year-old person, what could help me, I would always try, me now as 51, would always try and help someone, because I always think that's part of your responsibility, because how difficult it can be to get into television or broadcasting or wherever. And any little help you can give to people, if they show interest and they show keenness, then I think we all have to help as well, because nobody's going to get anywhere if the women that are already in there don't help them.
Yeah, I think definitely what you're saying, like building that network or following those that you're aspired to, like what kind of area you want to go into and start like getting into, like what are they doing, right, to get there. And I think that's really important. That's one of the things that Addy was talking about, like volunteering gives you perspective, not just because, oh, I might be good at this skill, but then you also get to see the others around. Oh, for that, you need that role and that role. I might be good at that role too. So that curiosity also kind of makes you shift, because I started as a journalist in the traditional way where like all you do is interview. You don't do camera, you don't edit, you don't produce, nothing. And then the entire industry changed to like, you're a video producer, you're a content creator. So you need to know a little bit of everything to understand how you're going to target your audience or how you're going to deliver your message. So I think that it's a great perspective to also be curious about like, what's happening also all around me, even though I'm just the camera girl or the editor. Addy, anything final thoughts on resources, techniques, tools, anything that you feel like, okay, this is in high demand, you should go try it?
It's funny because I was thinking to myself, I don't think there's any one thing. And then Wendy just immediately took the words out of my mouth on that, because I think this is an industry that is not, again, it's not 9 to 5, but it's also an industry that inherently is going to keep changing as the tech changes. What you learn in, even if you did study film, what you learn in film school 10 years ago, a lot of it's not being carried over now, or a lot of it's changing. And when people go, oh, I only know how to use this device, you run like this particular carbonite, and you go, well, you gotta know how to use, both software versions or a hardware version of things. I find that we are in sort of I saw Sarah mention this about Ludwig recently shutting down the production company. I mean, the history of that is there was a company before that that ran that, and then Ludwig took it over, tried it for I think about a year. I might be misquoting the time frame, but ultimately then it failed for him as well. And I think esports is still young. Like, that's something I've always had to remind people. I mean, if you look at traditional sports, we've been doing that for much longer. We've been doing that for so much longer. And there is a formula and there is a way that we know people like. And even then, things are changing. People don't want to watch it on cable TV anymore. They want to see it streamed. They want to see these different ways of watching the things they used to like. And I think that's a hard thing to go when I get asked, oh, what should I learn? What certification? It's hard to say. And I think a lot of it is, again, just putting yourself out there and getting that experience is easier said than done. It's the, oh, go out there and get, get some get some new experience. But I think it's a challenge because you can't give one kind of answer. But I think that's what makes this industry the way that it is. You have to go into this knowing, hey, things are going to change. What I know today is not going to apply in the next decade. Unlike pre-professional programs like dentistry and medicine and even law, they have continuing education courses. This is not industry that gives that. Like, they don't have a preset, okay guys, everyone needs to take these credits for the year to be compliant. Like, we don't have that. But I do think I've told a lot of people computer science backgrounds in a weird way have a slight advantage just because they understand software, they understand sort of the internet engineering that's going into a lot of live streaming. But even then, I'm like, even if you had an English degree or a business degree, there are so many courses online that will teach those things as well. And even as a financial thing, there are free courses, there are free things. There's just, I think a lot of it's digging. I think a lot of it is digging, a lot of researching, and a lot of just going, okay, I'm seeing these trends and seeing these patterns of, oh, things are moving both between this weird line of hardware and software. I can learn hardware to a degree. I can also learn a little bit of software side. So I think there's, for me, at the very least, I would say just be open on learning both hardware, software things, whether that is not OBS isn't the Olympic Broadcasting Services, but there's another like online program called OBS as well that helps with live streaming. And so like things like that, being familiar with those things and learning, how to use a stream deck and all of that, I think that's, that's important. Because I'll say this on Encore's side, we have a laptop that they can rent out, and it comes with it's a video playback machine, but it comes with a little stream deck. And some of my folks I've seen, oh, they've never seen the little device before. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know that they can press buttons and use it as a tool to help them transition between videos and cues and stuff, because they just didn't know how it works. And so I think a lot of it is just, looking at what other people have done. They usually like to share. I like to share. I have 10 mentees right now that text me all the time and email me still that go, hey, I'm wanting to start a program for kids out in Atlanta, particularly both boys and girls, that to get them into esports, because they don't know things like engineering can help them in production, or things like marketing is important in film and production. And so it's just, how can I do that? And then we brainstorm and we go from there. But it's a lot of, once you have I think, as Wendy said, it is our responsibility for those that we've been able to get into this to share what we have and continue to share, and not kind of gatekeep to ourselves. I think that's a big thing. don't be
To
like, oh, I'm
close that out,
successful, you know, and
you,
not share.
you mentioned something that is really true. I've seen so much more input and thoughtful on the education program for the schools. Like, remember that in schools used to be like, oh, we just have the news, like the journal or the newspaper. But now, like some schools, they're actually doing their mini production or their news. And I mean, we've hosted a ton of kids in our studio just for them to see like the behind the scenes, right? And that gets them excited because they're like, oh, you can do that, and you can do it corporately, or you can do it like in different areas. So I think that also gives a perspective that there are resources there. We just need to open that door for that curiosity and like get people excited. And we've shared so many great insights in this conversation from all of your different career paths of how some of those things will help you for success. I'm immensely like honored to have a few of your time to be here and share that with everybody. And I think one of the most important things, my biggest takeaways is that we're never done. Like, it's not like you just learn something and then that's it. It's like you're still going on the technology, the trends, the innovations, the teams, the collaboration. Now doing remote things is so much seamless than in the past. So I think keeping up with what's happening, being open to changing, it's kind of what gives you that career advantage. Because like even if you learn it this way, it's not going to be like that in 5 years, especially in our industry, in media and broadcasting. It's always going to change and keeping up to date. And I think Gals and Gears does a great job as bringing those things up to light, right? Like creating this Techquity Tuesday is for that, to give you insights into this industry or to learn how to do budget or to learn how to do something else. So I'm really thankful for your time, ladies. It was a great conversation. I do want to thank also the sponsors, Signiant, AJA, Dell, Adobe, Blackmagic Design, and Backblaze for always supporting conversations and projects like Gals and Gears and Techquity Tuesday. That gives me the reminder for what's coming up next on January 14 at Techquity Tuesday. It will be Money Smart Women, Financial Planning for Media Pros with financial expert Tracy Roby. And I know we can all use that. And also, we'll be sending out a poll by email in advance to that session to make sure we hit on what interests you. We don't want to forget the Gals and Gear Connect Women's Leadership Summit. Put it on your calendars, Tuesday, April 8th, during NAB show in Las Vegas. And the topic will be Resilience Redefined, Building Wealth and Wellness Together. So a couple of things to put in your calendar to save the date, to stay in touch, to keep being connected. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Until next time, happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.